Okay, we're rolling.
Okay, this is an interview at the Holiday Inn, Kingston, New York. It is the 6th of October, 2006, approximately 1:30 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Thomas William Hennessey. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, 12/2/26.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to going into service?
What was my what?
What was your, how far did you go in school before you went into service?
6 months of high school.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
And when was that?
May 26th, 1943.
Okay. And the U.S. Navy?
U.S. Navy.
Why did you decide to enlist?
Well, I heard the Navy was clean.
Mm-hmm.
Then I found out who kept it clean.
Okay, you did, huh? Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was in a candy store. It was around 1 o'clock, I guess, in the afternoon, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousin and I were together, and he said, it looks like we're going to finally get a job, because there was no work done.
Do you remember your reaction when you heard about that?
Yeah, where the hell's Pearl Harbor?
Uh-huh, that's what most say. Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Sampson, New York.
How long were you at Sampson?
Very short, 4 or 5 weeks, and they moved us out.
Where did you go from Sampson?
They put us what they called an express train to California. It took us 12 and a half days to get to California. We stopped for cattle cars, mail train, anything. We did our exercises in the Chicago stockyards, and we had a wonderful chef on the train. He knew how to make wet bologna sandwiches and warm milk. That's just about what we got for the whole trip.
Really? And what happened once you got to California?
We went to a camp called Camp Elliott outside of San Diego. And we wound up doing nothing. Then we all got put on trucks and we brought down to San Diego Harbor, and they put us on LSTs. You know what an LST is?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's your version? They called it a landing ship tank.
Mm-hmm.
Our version was large slow target. And we went out to Pearl Harbor, another 12-day trip. And we went up to a camp called Iwo Heights, outside of Hawaii. We were there about a week, and they had us digging trenches for a week or 10 days. And after the 10 days was up, we were getting shipped out. There was guys filling them trenches in. They didn't have enough work for everybody, so they made work. So we got onto transports, and we went all the way down to a place called Manus in the Admiralty Islands off New Guinea.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to go on a ship called the USS Nassau, CVE-16. No, I was supposed to go on Hancock, CV-19. And it wasn't there. Nobody knew where it was. So the place was a foul-smelling slum. It only had like a half-mile of land, and the rest the Japs still had. And it smelled. So they asked me if I wanted to take me. They asked a bunch of us if we want to sign on for a short cruise. So I got another LST. And I thought we were just going out. We only went out a little ways and found out we made the invasion of Palau. And after Palau, which was not a very pleasant place, I think they had 15,000 casualties the first 3 days.
Now, what was your job?
No, I was still a gopher, whatever they wanted me to do.
Okay, you hadn't had any training outside of your basic.
I fired 6 rounds from a .22. That was my rifle range.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I hit anything. And oh, my cousin was with me all this time. We grew up together. It was 6 weeks difference in our ages. We went all the way to New Guinea together. That's Manus. Mm-hmm. And he got transferred to the cruiser Wichita. And I was waiting for the Hancock. And they put me on this LST, which got a shellac in it at a place called Palau in September of '44. And then, where the heck did we go then? We came back to Manus, and they put me on an aircraft carrier, a small one, the escort carrier. And we went up to the Philippines. We made it, the 7th Fleet. There was 3 fleets out there, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. The 7th used the small landing ships, and they called that MacArthur's Navy. And we made the landing there in October something, 21st or 24th of '44. And somehow we wound up picking up, we picked up the prisoners from one of the camps, the guys from the Death March and all that. We picked them up and put them on a hangar deck, and we took them to Guam, where they had hospitals. From there I got taken off.
Now, what carrier was that? You said it's a...
The USS Nassau,
Okay.
CVE-16. And I got taken off with a bunch of other guys and put on an LCM or something. And it took me to Ulithi Harbor in the Marianas, where finally I found the USS Hancock. And I went aboard, and the OD looked at my paper and he said 5th Division. So I went in the 5th Division, and nobody's telling me what to do. I'm there for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a place to sleep. I had no working parties, nothing. So I found this boatswain mate, and I asked him, you know, I said, what the hell am I doing here? He says, what's your name? I said, Hennessey. He says, you're not in my division. I said, I'm not. Well, who am I supposed to be with? So he looked it up. He says, you're supposed to be in the 3rd Division. So I got down to the 3rd Division, and he said to me, where have you been? I said, I've been in the 5th Division. So he said, well, you're in the Gunnery Division. So they transferred me, made me a 3rd loader on a Quad 40, which then I worked my way up to 1st loader. And we had a couple of strikes we made in the Philippines yet. And I don't know where hell, I think we were off French Indo China, I'm not sure. You know, it's so big, you're only involved with the immediate gun crew.
Mm-hmm.
I had guys in my division, I didn't even know their names. And as I worked my way up to 1st loader on a quad. And I was on a quad called a 6A. And we were, I can't remember where it was. But anyway, one of our own aircraft came in and landed and came abreast of the island. And everybody walked out to service the aircraft. And he opened up his bomb bay and a 550-pound bomb fell out. And I'm not sure, again, they killed 96 guys and wounded about 300 or 400. So damage control did a great job as usual. They got the fires out and put down new flight deck and got rid of the old stuff, and the corpsmen, as usual, did great. They took the dead off the thing, and we started marking up who they were and take care of the wounded. And we stayed with the fleet. I think we went back to Ulithi and then we come out again. Then we got hit with another suicide plane. Came down and just brushed us, side of the ship.
That was the Kamikaze.
Yeah, that was one of them. And a lot of the plane came down onto the flight deck and that, but nobody got hurt. Then we got hit. We took another one. He landed right on the gun mount. And he dropped a 500-pound bomb. And it was a Marine. I can't remember his name. He was standing there and the bomb came down and went right through the catwalk where he was standing, like here. The bomb went through there. Went right through the catwalk. Didn't go off until it hit the water. And he's standing there like this with his mouth wide open. In fact, I was talking to him at the reunion we had in Charleston a couple of weeks ago. He turned out to be a police captain in New York City. And I don't know, and we just did bomb runs along French Indo China. And then we went up to Iwo Jima. And that was pretty bad.
What happened here? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Continue.
We went up to Okinawa. And the invasion of Okinawa was on Easter Sunday morning, April Fool's Day, 1945. It was funny that they came together. And the first 7 days it was hell. There were suicide planes all over the place. A couple of the carriers got hit real bad. Then April 7th, 1945, we were off the coast of Okinawa. I was just finishing chow. And I was walking up to my gun crew, where my gun was. And general alarm went. Well, that always went, so that you didn't get too overly excited. They called it a bogey coming in, unidentified aircraft. So I was walking on the hangar deck when the bogey went off. So we started walking a little faster. Then we heard a 5-inch go off. That meant he's in the fleet. Then heard the 40s going off. They said he's getting close. Then I heard the 20s, and I said he's after us. So we ran along the hangar deck, and with the guy I was with, he split and went where he's supposed to go. And I got up onto the bow. That's where my gun station was. And I climbed over that railing. I don't even remember going over it. I grabbed the phone and I said, "Man, one, manned and ready." And the guy gave me his angle. And he was about 40 feet off the water, coming in this way. We were going this way. The captain turned the ship to move it this way, give him a bow shot. Well, he was coming in, and it was about 400 yards out. We hit him, and he pulled back on the thing, and he went up in the air, and he straightened out again. Now he come over the top of us. And we all dove on the deck. We thought he was going to land on the gun mounts. But he went over and he was going along the flight deck about 15 feet, I guess. And he dropped a 500-pound bomb. And that went through the flight deck, into the hangar deck, and killed, I'd say, about 45 guys from my division that were in the gun tubs there. The explosion of the plane got caught in the tail and flipped him. And he went flipping down the flight deck. And on the after end of the ship, we had about 25 or 30 planes loaded with bombs. And he went into them. And they went up, and the gasoline went up, and all the ready service ammunition went up. And 1 million gallons of high octane blew up. And I don't know how much bunker oil went up. It was quite a bit. And I gotta say, I've had better days. But the guys, as usual, they did a good job. Putting the fires out, taking care of the wounded, moving the dead.
Did any other ships come to your aid at that point?
Oh, always, always.
Mm-hmm.
We were flag. Flag means we had the admiral of the fleet aboard. As soon as we got hit, I don't know what it was. It wasn't in my eye scope. It's either a tin can or a cruiser will come alongside and take flag right off. They don't stay with us.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, we put up a. We had a heck of a time for a while. But tin cans were picking up. We had a couple of hundred guys in the water that got blown over or had to jump over because of the fire. And we were hurt, but we stayed with the fleet till the next afternoon, I think. They got a relief carrier out there to take our place. And the reason we didn't go, we didn't want to take them over and take a photograph. There's supposed to be 4 carriers there, and there was 4, but they weren't workable. We pulled out, they pulled in, the working ones. So they actually, because the guy that hit us didn't get back. So we went to Ulithi and they couldn't help us. Because you know how big an elevator is? It got blown right off the ship. So we went back to Pearl. And we were the first Essex-class carrier to go and dry dock in Pearl Harbor during the war. And it was, they gave us a 10-day R&R. We went to this camp where if you wanted a beer at 6 o'clock on a day in the morning, you could have it, or 2 eggs, whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
We had no duty, no chores, no nothing. Then it changed around. They brought us back to the ship. And the captain and the exec, they were professional naval people. They wanted that ship to get out there to make the end, be in the end of the war. That's their life, you know. Mm-hmm. So everybody, and I mean everybody from commander down, was over the side scraping paint, doing whatever had to be done. They wanted to, you know, get us out. So about a month they had us fixed up, and all new guns that got knocked off, and everything was ship-shape. We left. Out. Before we left, the night before we left, these trucks came down the dock, and they had big wooden crates, not as wide as this room, but longer than this room. And they picked them up and they put them on the flight deck. And we didn't know what was in it, and they put Marines on them to watch the crates. So next morning we left. And the day after that, I think, or 2 days later, we hit Wake Island. And that was a milk run stop now, you know. Mm-hmm. Everybody going up to the war zone hit Wake. And we went up to the Philippines, Luzon someplace. And I'm sure it was there. Well, they took the crates off. And Tokyo Rose got on the horn. And she said, "Welcome back to the fleet, Rocket Roger." And she said, "If you don't know what I'm talking about, Hancock, we know you got rockets." That's what it was.
Wow.
Putting rockets on the planes. So I think we went up along the French Indo China. Because you don't know where you are. Nobody tells you where you are. You have to guess, or a pilot might say something to you. So we went back up and we caught the tail end of Okinawa. Then we went up off Japan. And you go in for 3 days and strike. And you pull out for 1 day to get resupplied. And that's what we did for about August. At the end of August, it's September 15th. And we were about 35 miles outside of Tokyo when they told us that the war was over. And the only time I ever heard it in the Navy, the captain said, "We got the word. The Empire of Japan has surrendered." He says, "Well done. I repeat, well done." And we went under an attack. They were still coming. There was a lot of them didn't get the message.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, we were in Tokyo Bay when the Missouri came in. And I wound up in Yokohama, and there was nothing bigger than me. So the whole thing, Tokyo and Yokohama were level, completely. And well, the captain was a great guy. His name was Dan Gallery, and he got on the horn and he says, "Oh, the first thing is." He went over to fleet headquarters or something, and he come back, and there was guys lined up on the hangar deck with their sea bags. And he said to the officer of the deck, "What's going on?" He said, "We got orders from 3rd Fleet, all men with less than 18 months sea duty to be transferred for further duty in Japan." And he said, "The hell they are." He said, "They're going home with us." So he says to the officer of the deck, he says, "Anybody been transferred?" He said, "Yeah, about 20 guys." He says, "Put the snail boats over the whale boats, get them back." And he said, "If any ship tries to leave my harbor," he says, "open fire on that bastards. They're going back as a crew." So he got us all back, and I guess he stepped on some toes. And he got on the horn, he says, he's probably wondering, he says, "But I told you when I came aboard, there'll be no scuttlebutt. You get all the stuff straight up from me." He says, "We've been transferred for further duty in Japan." He says, "We got 6 months coastal patrol duty off the coast of China." He said, "But hang on, guys." He said, "Do what the grandmother told the granddaughter. If you're being raped and you can't do nothing about it, sit back and enjoy yourself." He said, "But give me time." He said, "I got people I know." And sure enough, about a week later, we turned around, went back into Tokyo Bay. We took all our aircraft off. They came with bunks. And on the hangar deck, which is high,
Mm-hmm.
they welded bunks 10 high. The gun sponsons on the side of the ship, they took the guns off and made, we call them heads, bathrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And they built 3 or 4 different galleys on the hangar deck. And we picked up 5,000 troops. We put them in these bunks. And then we went down. We stopped at Okinawa for something, then we went back to San Pedro for Navy Day of 45. And we dropped these guys off and we turned around and we went to Manus. This is funny, this thing. We picked up the nurses and same thing, 5,000 people. And the captain decided to make a baseball field on the flight deck. So officers against enlisted men. So they were playing ball and the captain got up. And the sun on the equator is horrible. And he's trying to hit he can't even see the pitcher because the sun. And he put his hand up and he stopped the game. He went over and he picked up the phone. He made a phone call to the bridge. He turned the whole fleet around. so that he could hit the ball. And he did. And he could put it, then after he ran around the bases, he picked the phone up, he said, "Go back on course." And he got done, he says, "Captain's privilege." He was a good guy. No, then we went there, and then they took the ship up to Bremerton. They were going to decommission it. And we went up to a place called Port Townsend, up in Puget Sound. And we offloaded all our explosives and everything. Then we went back to Seattle, and I got discharged. I didn't get discharged. I got put on a train or something. Hope with millions of guys.
Yeah.
And I wound up in Lido Beach, Long Island. And waiting for my discharge. They had lines you wouldn't believe. If your name began with an H, there was an H line. They went from the East Coast to the West Coast. And the I, if your last name started with that letter, that's where you went. And you stood on line for hours and hours and hours and days. Every day was a new day. And I finally get up there and I give the guy, the guy gives me my stuff. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." I said, "This is missing, this is missing, this is missing." I said, well, "Can you fix that?" He wrote something down. He says, "There's a barracks down there. Go there. They'll take care of it." So I was there for 3 days waiting online. I got down there and I went to this barracks, and there's all kinds of sea bags hanging there. And the guy in there, I said, "You the barracks boss?" He said, "No." He said, "I'm waiting for get my discharge straightened out." So I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "How long you been waiting?" He said, 2.5 weeks. I said, "You're kidding." I said, they're almost done." He said, "They haven't even started." I said, "Give me my stuff." I went back, I went right to the head of the line, said to the guy, "Everything's fine." I said, "It's not going to do me any good to get anything anyway," so I said, "That's so fine." So the next thing I wound up on, a train dropped me off in Brooklyn on 4th Avenue and Atlantic. And I had no idea where I was. And I saw these 2 merchant marine sailors going back, and they had Sheepshead Bay on their arm. And I said, "I gotta follow that guy, he goes right by my house." So I got on the train and I put them and I followed. I got off at Newkirk Avenue and I walked about 11 blocks home. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I rang the doorbell and my sister said, "Your brother's home." She said, "Which one?" I said, "Second from top." So she came down and said, "Where you been? What happened? Did you ever run into Harry?" I said, "I ran into Harry in Pearl Harbor." She says, "Eddie called, he'll be home tonight. Billy called, he'll be home in 2 days." And then you do what you do. I bounced around for about 7 years. Couldn't get my act together. I was going to go back in the Navy. That's a drastic step too. I was going to go back in the Navy, and I got drunk one night with another guy, and we woke up at his house, and we needed a drink on a Sunday morning. We were in bad shape. And his brother said, "There's a place over in Whitestone, Queens called CYO. They're open this time, you can get drinks." Well, we went over there, and it was a Catholic youth organization that serves tea and Coke. So we were sitting there thinking how we could kill his brother when these two girls walked in. And we picked them up, you know, and went out with them, and we had a lot of money, and they thought, and we spent our whole pay, you know. And I went to my sister's house that night, and I said, I met the girl I'm going to marry. And she says, is she in an institution? So I married her, and next June will be 50 years.
Wow. Now, when were you discharged? What month and day, year?
1946, May.
Now, you said your brothers were in the service also?
Well, in reality, they're not my brothers. We were, during the Depression, all our families moved together.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the mothers died when we were small, like 3 and 4.
Mhm.
My mother died when I was 4. And my one aunt took us all in and raised us. So people used to get tired saying, how come we all got different last names?
Mm-hmm.
So we never mentioned it. We just said we were brothers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the two oldest guys, Eddie, he went to a Casarine Pass, worked his way all the way up to Sicily to boot into Italy, and walked into Germany. He was in the armored infantry. And he wound up on Okinawa.
Hmm.
And the other guy, Bill, he was a top turret gunner on a B-17 in 1942. And he was supposed to do 25 missions. Well, he did 27. And on 27th, they got clobbered over Bremenhaven. And pilot was killed, co-pilot was killed, navigator was killed, the 2 waist gunners were killed, tail gunner was all right, the bombardier I think was all right. And Bill took out 5 109 planes with him. He was a top turret gunner. And he dropped down to the waist gun. They were both dead. So he grabbed the waist gun and he fired. He got another 109, and then he crippled another one. And he crawled into the front seat and moved the pilot. And he was a top sergeant. He flew the plane into England. And he couldn't land it. And he crashed it. But he got out. He got hit 4 or 5 times. And he had frostbite, and he lost a boot and a glove. But he wrote home and to my sister and said, you might hear from the government that I got hurt. Don't believe it. So he come home.
Okay, after you get out, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
No.
Did you use the 5220 Club?
I signed up for it, but I never drew a check.
Mm-hmm. Did you join any veterans organizations?
Well, I joined the American Legion, but most of the guys at my post were from World War I, so it wasn't my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was too busy working. I had after I got married, I had 2 full-time jobs. I used to pick up bodies at night for undertakers. And I drove a trailer in New York City. And then I lucked out. I got, you know, people say you're crazy. I got a job driving a bus in Manhattan. It was a good union job. I made good money. My hours my own, whatever I wanted to pick. I worked there 30 years. Moved up, said to my wife, let's move upstate. Her family came from Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a camp on Sacandaga. Typical camp, you know, nothing matched.
Yeah.
So we bought a place over in New Hampshire because I said, there's too many people waiting to get this thing. All of a sudden, everybody died. Bing, bang, boom. And it was down to my wife and her sister and another person. Well, her sister lived in California. It was no good to her. So we bought the sister out. Now we had leverage with the other one. And I said, well, we'll use the place June, July, August, September, and October. And you can have it November, December, and January. You can't get in there in November, December. So I bought her out, and we used it as a camp. And 5 years ago, we got washed out in the storm.
Oh, when that storm
So my bride says, why don't we build a new house? I said, who? She says, you, me, and Tim, one of my sons. I says, you and me can't go to Price Chopper without getting in an argument. How the hell are we gonna build a house? I said, I'll tell you what you do. I said, I'll stay, we lived in Latham then. I said, I'll stay here and watch television, and you two do what you want to do. So 2.5 years went by, and she said to me, you can come up. So I went up and I stood on the hill looking. I said, Mother of God, how big is that place? She said, what, you mean square feet? I said, yes, I don't know. She said, it's got 5 bedrooms. 5 bedrooms. She said, there are 3 full bathrooms. One has a hot tub. And we got 2 full kitchens. One on the main floor and one in the basement, so when we walk out to go to the lake, we don't have to go upstairs. And then I went in the living room. Big fireplace. 22-foot ceilings with a balcony looking out from the master bedroom was up in the balcony thing. And I said to my son, why did you build that closet so big? He said, Dad, you always tell me to think. I was having a lot of trouble with my legs, diabetes. He says, I can have that closet down and apart and an elevator put in if they cut your legs off. Well, I said, I'm happy to hear that. So that's where we live now. My son has a motorcycle shop on Route 30 in Vales Mills. My wife's a nurse in the VA. She's going to retire next year, she says. And I have another son that's retired from the Navy, and he lives out in, he has a home in, where the hell is it? The gambling place.
Oh, Las Vegas?
Las Vegas. And he's does something with the Navy, ships, oh God, as a civilian. Right now he's in Seattle, that's all I know. And then I got a daughter that lives in New York City. And she's the apple of my eye. That's it, and I'm here.
Okay, so how do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Well, I guess I grew up a little bit. I met a lot of guys.
Do you ever stay in contact with any of them?
Oh, here's one you love. There was a guy on my gun crew. He was the first loader on my shift. His name was Frank Maurizio. With all the hassle and bustle, I get up one morning and Frank's gone. They transferred him. I knew he lived in Queens, but I had no idea where. So I went through the phone book. Every place I went for 60 years, I've looked and looked and looked. Come up here, I'd look at the phone book. I'd go to Philadelphia, I'd look at the phone book. Couldn't find him. About 2 years ago, one of our guys went on the Intrepid in New York City with his daughter. Now his daughter was 45, and she was wearing one of these hats. And a guy walked up and said, where'd you get that hat? She said, my father was on that ship. He's a plank owner. He says, I'm a plank owner. So he's telling me this when I met him then. And I said, what was his name? He said it was an Italian name. Did he mention the division? He said 3rd Division. I said, that was my division. So I said, what? He says, Frank Munso? I said, would it have been Maurizio? He said, that's it. I said, you got any information? He said, I got it all home. So when we got home we were in New Orleans, when we got home, he gave it to me. And it was 10 miles from my daughter's house. So I went down to my daughter's on Friday night. I got up at 5:30 in the morning. I went over to his house. I got there by 7. And I just walked up and I banged on the door. And I yelled, open up! And he gets up in his pajamas and opens the door. And he's all set to start yelling. And I walked right past him. I said, hi, Frank. And he says, Tom? Where did you come from? So I stayed there 3.5 days. And what was it? Oh, here's the clincher. I drove a bus. Going to New York, we had to go over Northern Boulevard. I passed by his house 3 times a day.
Isn't there something?
I said, how long you been living there? He said, since the war ended. I said, oh. I said, you never rode a bus? He says, never. And I'm still in touch with him today. You know, we call each other. I call John, the Medal of Honor. I call him twice a week. You know, he was a good chief. You know, and they say he goes to Pearl Harbor every December. So, a couple of years ago, on the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, I was in Hawaii with my wife, and John was there with his wife. We were in different hotels. 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. It's John Finn. He said, what are you doing? I said, big shock, John, but I'm sleeping. Well, he said, get up, get dressed, I'll meet you in 20 minutes downstairs. We're going to Pearl Harbor. I said, John, there's 180 seats on the Arizona. The whole United States wants to be there for this trip. How the hell are you going to get me on there? So he said, my wife said, you know, John, get dressed. So I got dressed, went down. Car pulls up with a Navy captain driving. And he's in the back seat. He says, come on. So we got in. We went to, the line you wouldn't believe was 3 abreast for miles. People waiting to get on the base for the ceremonies and all that. So we had a special gate we went through. And I got through 3 checkpoints because the president was going to be there and the vice president. And so we got through 3 checkpoints, and I got to the last checkpoint, and there was a lady Marine Major. And boy, was she a good-looking woman. And snappy with them whites on. She was a Marine Major. So she said, she's looking at me, she says, what's your name? I said, Hennessey, Thomas W. She says, your name ain't on the list. So he turns around and says, that's all right, lady, he's with me. And she says, pray tell, who are you? So he turns around, she sees the medal around his neck, and she says, oh, you must be Mr. Finn. And she gave him a highball, you know. He said, that's right. He said, that man was my gunner. And he says, I don't go without him. She said, but you should have called ahead his name. He said, I didn't even call my own name in. So she said, we know about you, we don't know about him. So he said, will you tell George that I was here and I couldn't make it? He's all set to leave. He's a thick donkey. So with that, the guy comes up and he says, what's going on here? He says, this man doesn't have a pass to get on the base. So John says, well, he's with me, you know, the same thing. And he says, Social Security number. He gives it to me. I gave it to him and he went over and he had a computer there. He comes back and he says, without thinking, the last two numbers in your service number. I said 86. He says, let them on. He says, these two guys were together. And she said, no. She says, I'm sorry, but I'm in charge. Now he turned. He says, no, you're not, lady. We're in charge. You've got 30 seconds to find that pass, or I will have you forcibly removed. Do you understand me? And he, you know, she was doing her job, but this was a one-time shot, you know. So we get on, and as I'm going down the gangway, this guy gives me a shot in the ribs, and he says, us Irish got to stick together. So I got on, and I was sitting as close to you as I am to George Bush, and I had Dick Cheney on this side, and Colin Powell on this side. You know, for a kid from Brooklyn, I felt I did pretty good.
Yes.
But then we, what did I say, every time we go out to California, we visit John. He comes up to my house on the lake, you know.
Now, was a recipient from Pearl Harbor. He had the was he awarded the congressional while he was on ship with you?
No, no.
He got it after the war?
He got the medal at a place called Kaneohe, which was a PBY squadron on the other side of the island, and they got attacked 5 minutes before Pearl Harbor, and he was hit 21 times with shrapnel. See, they claim he got the first enemy plane. He doesn't. He said, I shouldn't have anything. And being a typical Navy chief, he was ordered to a hospital by a commander. So he didn't want to go. So he did what he was told. He went to the hospital, he signed himself in, then turned the page and signed himself out. Came right back out. He's done what he was told. But I'd go with him anytime.
Now, he had been awarded it while he was on your ship?
No,
or?
he got awarded in 1942 aboard the Enterprise.
Okay, but he was on the Hancock with you?
Later.
Later. So you were aware he was a
Medal
of Honor winner. How did he act toward the others? How did they act toward him?
I'll tell you how he acted. When the war was over, they gave us slips so we could authorize the ribbons. He gave you a paper that tells your name and rank and how many stars you invite and all that. And the captain has to sign it. The captain signed it and said, "Will Lieutenant Finn please report to the quarterdeck?" And he come up and the captain put his hand out. He says, "I never knew I had a Medal of Honor aboard." Nobody but a few of us knew it. And we were sworn to secrecy. You know? He didn't want nobody to know. And he's that way, well, he's a lot freer today with people asking him to look at his medal. You know, they get $1,000 a month from the government. You know, it goes back a throwback to the Civil War, where they gave them $10 a month. And they did that up until only a few years back. Then they raised it to 100 and then 200. And you know what our great congressman wants to do? They want to tax it. Now it's a lot. He gets $1,000 a month. Now there's only 140 of them. So you're talking $140,000 a month from this government. They can't afford it. I mean, he's good. He's 97. He's in good shape. But what they talk to guys like George Lang, completely paralyzed. Another guy, he lost his right arm in the Battle of the Bulge, and he stuck the stump into the snow till it froze. Then he continued on fighting until he wound up killing them with knives. And they don't want to give him $1,000 a month. That's my life story.
Okay, well, thank you very
I
much
don't
for
know
the
what you can
interview.
do with it.